Hello and welcome. My name is Hector Del Castillo, and I am your host and also the speaker for today's webcast. And the topic of today's presentation is building great products customers love. We will get started, and you should see my slides on your screen. And also what I wanted to go over is some basic housekeeping. I want to thank the 280 group for providing a book that I'll be providing to everybody who attended this particular session. And also Launch Podcast for recording a podcast of this session. And we will make available the video as well as the podcast to everyone that signed up so that you can view or listen to the session on demand. So thank you to Charlie Burney at Launch Podcast. Also, thank you for Launch Workplaces, and we are broadcasting live from their conference room in Rockville, and they're providing the space, and we want to thank them for their graciousness in hosting us. This is the beginning of a weekly series of podcasts regarding actionable business intelligence for executives and business leaders. If you're on Twitter, please use hashtag business intelligence, and you can follow me at HM Del Castillo, and feel free to retweet any messages that we will be tweeting live throughout the session. Also stay tuned because everyone gets a copy of the Phenomenal Product Manager ebook, and this is courtesy of Brian Lawley from the 280 Group, which is a consulting firm in Silicon Valley. So today's discussion is going to be focusing around answering this question. Why are some organizations better than others at building great products? In today's discussion, we will be going into detail into why it's important and why product management and product marketing are functions that matter. And we will discuss steps on the path to successful products. We will summarize with key takeaways, and we will also have a Q&A portion. And I want to encourage all of you that if you have any questions, please use your chat window to submit your questions, and we will get to them during the Q&A portion, which will be towards the end of the presentation. And before the end, we will wrap up. I will actually provide information as to how you can download the free ebook after we're done with today's discussion. So let's get started. So why does product management matter? Most organizations struggle to achieve a steady flow of successful products. It's really a daunting challenge for most product-driven organizations to create a stream, a flow of successful products. You take a look at the big companies, and very few do this right. You can say, well, Apple does this all the time, and yes, Apple has done this quite a bit successfully. Other companies may do it, but most organizations will struggle, and it's actually a huge challenge for them to provide a stream or a flow of successful products in the marketplace. And we will actually be discussing some of the things that actually prevent organizations from creating successful products. So the first thing is, if you talk to most experts, regardless of what products are being produced or industries or the type of products, whether they are tangible goods or services or a combination of both, most organizations fail. And the latest research, and this is actually a study that was published just recently from MIT Sloan School of Management, a professor did some research and studied several different companies across industries and that have different products, and found that most products fail within 2 years of introduction into any market. And the reasons why are all listed in here. You can find more details in the references that I will be providing at the end of the session, but be aware that this is reality. Most products fail within 2 years of introduction into the market. So if you look at what any product entails, it's not only about the technologies that make up the product and whether the product is something tangible like a good or purely a service which is intangible. Great products have to be at the cross section of a market, a set of customers, and then the business has to be able to produce and support and create and do everything that is required to operate the business in itself. And usually there are two tracks involved. There are the customer and market development track, which is all about presenting, understanding the customer, collecting the voice of the customer, presenting products, positioning products, and ensuring that products continue to be valuable into a market and to specific groups of customers. But also the second track is all about product ideation, the conceiving of products, and the design and the architecting of products. But often, the business itself has to continue to be transformed even as new products are introduced to the market. And we will talk a little bit more detail as to what is entailed in product development and in the production of products and the continuous introduction of successful products in a market. The first thing is most vendors, they fail to anticipate risk factors, and not just the risk factors that are internal to the organization, the ability to execute on plans, the ability to stick to schedule and gather requirements and figure out the scope of products. But it's also about understanding other factors that are usually external risk factors that are outside of the organization that have to do with the volatility, the complexity, ambiguity, and uncertainty involved in whatever the situation and whatever product is being produced or is being conceived. Most product-driven organizations that do this successfully, and I mentioned earlier, companies like Apple, also companies like Microsoft and Google, they actually have lots of product managers and product marketing managers working together, and there are actually critical business functions that guide the executives and the founders and the managers of those organizations to make smarter decisions and get better results from any investments in products. As a matter of fact, a recent study and a survey from CBS News Report puts product management as the number 4 corporate position in the US. And this only ranks lower compared to CEOs, other executives within companies, and general managers. And these are the actual stakeholders that most product managers and marketing managers are working with and collaborating with to ensure that whatever they're doing aligns with the business and product strategies. The common thing about any product that is successful in the marketplace, in order for it to become profitable, is that the product has to be viable. And viable has 3 different characteristics. It doesn't matter what the product is. The product has to be valuable. That means there are customers out there that see the value and can use it and have a solving a specific problem that they have, but it's also feasible. And it's feasible because the organization can produce it, they can actually make it happen, produce that value proposition, and be able to deliver it and continue to support it throughout its life cycle. And finally, the product must also be scalable, meaning that with very little additional effort, it can actually produce exponential growth in market share, adoption, with very little effort required by the organization or by the vendor. And if you really think about why it is so hard for organizations to produce successful products, is because it's really tough to come up with something that actually meets all 3 of these characteristics. And it doesn't really matter what the product is or what the industry is. Coming up with anything that is valuable and feasible and scalable is often where the challenge lies. So in order to create successful products, it really is not just a challenge for medium-sized or larger companies. It also tends to be a struggle for most entrepreneurs when they're in startups. So, matter of fact, the main difference, the what I describe an entrepreneur, it's only a French term for product manager and product marketing manager. In other words, entrepreneurs pitch their ideas that produce a business and products to investors, whereas product managers and product marketing managers pitch their ideas about products to executives and senior managers within companies. Otherwise, they're working on creating ideas that transform into products that create profitable lines of business. So now that we understand a little bit about some of the challenges as well as the critical roles that are needed within organizations to actually produce successful products, let's talk a little bit about the path to successful products. And what we will discuss here is 9 different insights, 9 steps on the path to successful products. So the first thing is the path to successful products entails successful products that require focus. And the power of focus is what you must harness within your organization in order to produce a stream of successful products. What I mean by that is that you need to set a transformative purpose, a vision of why you exist as an organization, and a vision as to why it is that you are putting together a team that will look at specific needs of a market and groups of customers and ensure that you have clarity as to what that purpose is. And that particular vision has to be devised for execution. Not just must you have the ability to come up with something, but you have to have the ability to plan and then fiercely execute. And in order for this to be executable, you have to ensure that your objectives are smarter. They're specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, that you can also figure out how often to evaluate and when and how to readjust when needed. And also have the ability to convey the confidence to your team and everybody in the building that it can be done and that you have the capabilities as well as the motivation to actually be successful once you begin working on this task. The second piece is that the path to successful products requires teamwork. There is not any kind of task regarding products that can be done by a single person. It requires team. So actually coming up with successful products is a team effort and never a one-person show. Unlike what the media likes to let us believe that, for example, Steve Jobs is all about the reason why Apple is successful. The fact is, Apple has lots of product managers and lots of marketing managers, lots of project managers, as well as product owners working together, collaborating. And what they first had to do, what the executives within those companies, what they first had to do is figure out how to build and nurture great teams. And the challenge is to how do you do this time after time, every time you need to put together a new product or come up with something that is going to produce and continue to grow the business value. So part of this is understanding how to build a talent portfolio and having access to different skills and domains of expertise, knowledge needed to execute on different tasks and activities needed to produce products and to create new successful products. It is also a matter of cultivating the right culture within the organization to ensure that teams can work together and that the people are thriving in that environment. The next step to successful products requires a playbook. And a playbook is what's needed to ensure that everybody in the team understands who is on defense, who's on offense, who's on special teams, what game are you playing, and how long before time expires. These are all critical things that whenever you have a strategy, you need to understand what exactly you're doing before you even devise the strategy and before you start putting together an action plan and putting together metrics in place. So adopting a playbook is critical to success. And what I mean by that is that in the equivalent of organizations, a playbook is process. Process is simply a word for organizational discipline, so everybody knows exactly what is going on, who's working with whom, and what takes priority and why, because they all understand the game and the strategy to win that game and all the tactics that go along to ensure that at the end of the day, the organization is building business value and producing successful products in the marketplace. And part of that playbook is to understand who has the decision making. It's not necessarily the product managers or middle managers that own decisions, critical decisions about product investments. Usually it's someone in the C-suite, the executives of a company. And it has to be clear to everyone in the team that as you go along from one step to another of a product in its life cycle, everybody has to be clear as to who owns the decision. That's also part of understanding the roles and the responsibilities and the steps that are needed to succeed. The path to successful product also requires astute problem solving. You've got to have people who understand how to identify and then solve the right market problem. This is where often organizations will struggle mightily to understand what is the right market problem to solve that will have enough value for a solution that allows the entire organization to grow, because this is a problem that several people have in that market. Here's a quote from Albert Einstein about problem solving. And he stated, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that we used when we first created those problems." So what it really means is that once the ability to understand and identify problems is only one discipline, the ability to then solve it is a different effort. And most organizations that begin and don't do this enough, understanding what is the right problem to solve, assume that there's a need and they will produce a solution for that need, and then they found out that it wasn't really a need because not enough customers bought or adopted the solution. And so what I mean by that is that once you identify the right problem, then you come to figure out what is the best solution, because any problem may have end solutions, and you've got to have clarity in the room within your team as to which solution is best and which one takes priority and why. There are lots of ways you can solve the same problem, and you need to figure out very quickly that you're not going to be able to do it all. You need to prioritize and reprioritize based on what you're seeing from real customers. The next step to successful products requires a viable business model. So don't assume that your current business model is going to be the same that is required to produce multiple products. As a matter of fact, every time that you are looking at the possibility of working on a new type of product, you should also be looking at what's missing in your current business model that needs to be developed and figure out a way to test. So testing your business model is what goes along with new successful products. Usually, new products will require changes within the organization that has to do with either the structure or the number of resources and even the domains of expertise that you need in order to execute on that product. And often it's also about testing not just one, but multiple revenue streams from one product. And how do you do that when you're architecting the product? Often you need to not just architect the product, you need to architect the business in itself and very quickly figure out how to test multiple revenue streams that can be achieved through that one product. And once you define and understand that, figure out how to define that unique value proposition in order for your target customers to really understand and see if they actually see the value with very little effort. The next step to successful products requires customer focus. And what I mean by this is that sometimes, depending on where you are in the product lifecycle, if you are conceiving a product versus where you are currently developing the product, or even as you are about to launch the product, these are all different steps of a product lifecycle. And you need to gauge very quickly, how do you get real customers and collect their feedback to help you in making decisions as to what is next. And often making decisions as to what should be priority and why. So often customer management is needed because you will need to start tracking target customers, where they're located, figure out how to reach them, and figure out how to collect the feedback so you can actually make decisions based on real information and not just fiction or hunches. And what's key is to gain insights regarding buyer behavior, understanding not only what they're buying, but why they're buying, and what price points, and how often. These are all things that are very important to understanding how volatile the market is and reducing uncertainty and ambiguity, as well as the complexity of the sales and marketing process. Getting this done right is often a challenge for most organizations that don't know how to do this, how to go out and collecting the voice of the customer. And often what it means is that even if you're running agile development processes, your personas are mostly based on assumptions and hunches, which often are wrong assumptions, and without a way to test this against real live prospects, it's going to be sending you in the wrong direction. And often once you understand that, you want to be able to orchestrate the value creation process within your organization based on that knowledge and those insights from real prospects, real customers. The path to successful products also requires massive action. And what I mean by that is that once you understand exactly what the problem is and you have prioritized the solution and its implementation and have put together an action plan, then you have to get everybody involved in executing the plan, the implementation plan, as to how you build it, and figure out a way to build it using an iterative process, because you want to be able to develop quickly and responsibly so that you can continue to check against real prospects and real targets whether or not you're on the right track. And adopting a learning process is where many organizations will struggle. And often the learning process will require iteration. And here we see the example of the learning process from the Lean Startup, which has 3 steps: the build, measure, and learn. The key to implementing this is that you want to be able to figure out a way to very quickly develop, and if you're going in the wrong direction, failing fast, failing quickly, but always failing forward, meaning that the entire organization is learning what you shouldn't be doing and why that is the wrong direction and why you need to readjust your course. The path to successful products also requires customer engagement. And usually the process of where you're starting to talk to prospects and seeing what are their needs and their preferences. You start learning over time and over a series of conversations with different prospects whether or not you're on the right direction, but also understand that from your point of view, the actual product, from the customer's point of view, their understanding of the product may be coming from a different perspective. And what you really need to do is figure out what is that idea, what is that concept that those prospects have, especially the ones that you're targeting, regarding their idea of the whole product. The whole product usually is different than the actual product. And you often may need to find out things that you need to plan for before you can actually get adoption. One example is if you ever have bought a large appliance at any consumer retail store, like a Fry's or like a Best Buy, or even a Lowe's or a Home Depot, most buyers expect that with the price, they would get free delivery, free haul away of the old appliance, and free installation of the new appliance. And the reason why these vendors have to bundle that into the price is because most of us would not have the skills or the ability to do all of those things on our own. And as Eric Ries from the Lean Startup says, don't just assume and don't just take the customer's word for it. You have to test. Trust but verify is key to ensure that whatever you are gathering from prospects and from your customers is not just fiction. You need to ensure that it's real, that they're not only are you meeting the needs and preferences, but that you're going to be able to monetize and get adoption at the same time. And that way you're ensuring that you're building business value, because then your products, as you're offering in the marketplace, will not only sell a few units, you will sell to as many people that have the same needs and the same preferences, and you will continue that process for as long as possible with very little additional effort from the organization. The next step to successful products must be fact-based. This is where you become a fact-driven as well as data-driven entrepreneur or executive or manager within the organization. You have to use metrics to figure out whether to persevere or pivot. Persevering means you continue with the plan. Pivoting means you adjust and make different levels of adjustment, all the way up to going after a new target, or perhaps selling the product differently. These are all things that are pivots. And pivots usually will require changes, not just in the product development process, but also in your company's business model. So in order to ensure that you have the right metrics, that you're measuring the right things, and that you have some references, I recommend that you really know your competitors and your competitive landscape, because you can learn lots of things about what they've done and what they have not done, and understand the reasons why they haven't executed on some things. And also gives you an opportunity to figure out how to benchmark the right way. And benchmark not just between your team and other teams within the organization, but also benchmarking your performance against competitors and others in the same industry, in the same market. And that benchmarking requires lots of different ways of collecting information and measuring different things that are not just about your ability to execute and your productivity. It's also understanding what are the things that you have in your playbook that are no longer needed, or the ones that need to be improved because they're not really quite working for you, or the ones that need to be created because there are gaps in your playbook. These are all things that come out of benchmarking. And lessons learned shouldn't just be about the product itself. Usually it should be about the process as well as the roles and activities and other things that are all about figuring out how to really create a sustainable competitive advantage for your business. So finally, these are the 9 key takeaways that I want to focus on. We talked about the need to set a transformative purpose that is clear to everybody in your organization. Also building and nurturing great teams. Being able to have a playbook that you continue to maintain and support and improve, as well as focusing on understanding how to identify and then solve the right market problem, figuring out how to improve and test and refresh or renew your business model, and then focusing on management of customers, prospects, as well as current customers, and being able to develop quickly and responsibly once you have determined what the product needs to do and what it needs to be, as well as continuing to focus on customers and engage customers to help you decide when you have a minimum viable product. And finally, figuring out what are the right success metrics that you will need to use to figure out whether to persevere and when and how to pivot. So with that, that concludes this particular topic, and what I would like to do is actually now invite you to submit your questions, and I will continue to answer the questions until we get to the top of the hour before we conclude the webcast. And to give you some time to actually type in your questions, I wanted to remind you, please use a chat window to submit your questions, and we will answer them as they come in. Also, some basic housekeeping. This entire slide deck has already been posted on SlideShare, and I will share with all of you the link where you can find the slides on SlideShare, as well as I have given you a handout that you can download, and that handout is downloadable right now using this platform, but you can also download the handout from SlideShare as a PDF file. And it has information about all the key takeaways that we discussed in today's discussion. The slides also include additional links to sources that are out there, which are either free or almost free, available for additional reading if you want to get into more details. And I'm showing those references here on the slide. In the slide deck that you will get, these are all hot links that you can use to go directly to additional information that is mostly available online, where you can get more details regarding some of these topics. Also, I'm offering a free consultation to anyone that needs help in whatever it is that you're doing with your business. You can reach me via my website, which is at the bottom of this particular slide, and you can feel free to reach out to me, and we can figure out how I can help you. And if I can't help you, at least I can point you to someone who may be able to help you. There's also some upcoming courses in the DC metro area that are coming up. If you are a product manager or product marketing manager and you're looking to get a promotion, or you're looking to look for a new opportunity in product management or product marketing, or if you're shifting your career into product management or product marketing, these are great courses. And not only are they going to be coming up next month, but also we have some things coming. We have a promo code available for you that you can use. And these are courses that are from the 280 group, and information as to who you can contact to get more information, both on their website as well as if you need to talk to somebody live. There's another upcoming course here locally in Montgomery County in Maryland. In Silver Spring, later this month, I will be leading 2 half days of an expanded workshop on building great products that customers love. And if you're looking to enroll in this, please contact me and we can figure out how to get you enrolled. I would say that if you are a startup, I want to make sure that you are funded and you're already funded to actually develop a product, and you're in the middle of developing the product, but also maybe struggling with figuring out how to actually get some real prospects or customers, or even figure out exactly how to position your product. This would be a great discussion that is more detailed regarding everything we talked about in today's discussion. Also, here's some upcoming webcasts. And as I mentioned, this is actually a weekly series, and the Bold PM Insights webcast series is about actionable business intelligence for executives and managers and business leaders. And here's some of the topics that are coming up next. So we have a few questions, and I actually, one of the questions that has come up is, where can we actually get these particular slides? And as I mentioned earlier, the slides will be available on SlideShare, and I will announce before we wrap up today a link where you can actually view the information. And also, if you follow me on Twitter, I will be tweeting the information so that you can actually access the information offline. I mentioned earlier that we're also producing a podcast out of this session, as well as we'll be producing a video that will be available on demand. And if you signed up and registered for this session, you will receive an email with that information. So one of the questions is, why is Apple so good at doing what they do? And to answer that question is, Apple actually has lots of product managers and product marketing managers in their headquarters in Silicon Valley. And actually, if you look at Apple's track record as they're going from one product to another, they first started, I think, 2 weeks ago, Apple turned 40 years old. And if you looked at the span of their history, they started with computers, expanded to laptops, all for personal use. Then at some point, they shifted into media players and even had a few other products in between, but really the one that really got traction besides their personal computers and laptops was media players, and then they continued to introduce other products. If you look at their execution, it's brilliant. Apple is a marketing machine. And what I mean by that is that the reason why you get people lining up at their stores for product launches is a perfect example of a company that not just executes brilliantly on the product development side, developing new products and doing the R&D required to produce those new products and bring them to market. They're also brilliant in figuring out how to target prospects and make them aware that those products are coming, and the value of those products is evident even before they introduce those products into the market. And that's the reason why they get people to line up at their stores when they're launching new products. And a perfect example is that the tablet, the iPad, Apple was actually able to introduce the iPad once they understood that in order for them to get adoption in the marketplace, they they not only needed to control and manage the user experience of their tablets. If they wanted to actually get traction in the marketplace, they needed to control and manage the buyer decision, the journey of the customers looking for a tablet they needed to control. And what they did before they launched the tablet, they actually set up for the first time in a long time their own retail stores when they had none. Because they figured out prior to that, it was going to be nearly impossible to control the buyer experience when their products were being sold by someone else, like a Best Buy or a Fry's or any other retail store that sold their products. So what they did before they introduced the tablet, they actually decided to launch their own stores so that they can control the customer journey for those that were looking for a great tablet. So I hope that answers your question regarding that. Another question that I have is, what are the best means of attracting investors? Well, I mentioned earlier that when you're an entrepreneur, the only difference between an entrepreneur and a product manager is entrepreneurs are pitching to investors for funding, whereas product managers, product marketing managers are pitching their ideas about products to executives and managers of companies so they can get funding for their product development projects. So for investors, it is key as they're starting out that they need to position the entire company, not just the product, but the entire company, and show that the company and the purpose of the company is satisfying or meeting the desires and the needs of a market. In other words, you have to show that you're working, that your entire company you're establishing it and starting it because you are solving a market problem that exists today. Once you understand that, understand the why you're forming your company, and you can explain that in your pitch to investors, that will help you get traction with investors. And that really is the main difference between being able to have a great startup or not. So you really want to make sure that at least you have a market in whatever you're doing, and that whatever it is that you're doing, the market is large enough that even if you have other competitors out there today focusing on alternatives, that you're able to show that there is still a portion of that market, and I mean groups of customers that for the most part are dissatisfied with current alternatives, current competing products. That is another way that you can show to investors that your company has value, and it would have the ability to create that value and translate that into business value. So the main thing that I talked about before is that in order to identify the right market problem, it really takes a lot of work. Most entrepreneurs, I think, are struggling today in really understanding how to go about identifying the right market problems to consider solutions. And that's the first step. Identifying some of the needs of a market requires something different than the actual building of a product, which is the actual solution. It goes back to that quote that I showed earlier from Einstein, that whatever thinking we use to identify the problem is a different mindset, a different shift in thinking for figuring out what is the right solution. Entrepreneurs have to be great at doing both. great at being able to identify the right market problem to solve. And number two, identify out of all the available ways of solving that problem, what is the best approach that makes that product valuable, feasible, and scalable. You will need your solution to satisfy all three of these characteristics. And with that, I see that I have no more questions, so I wanted to actually begin the closing, and to let you know that the links on top of this particular slide show where you can access the entire slide deck to today's discussion, as well as where you can download the PDF file, the handout that has a summary of today's discussion. And also, I'm giving you a link where you can actually get free stuff from the 280 group. And the download link is the link that you can use to download a copy of the Phenomenal Product Manager electronic book from Brian Lawley at the 280 group. Also, if you're interested in setting up a follow-up discussion with me, feel free to contact me either via email or via my website. You can connect or follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter and stay informed about other things that we're putting together, not just with this Bold PM Insights webcast series, but also other endeavors that I'm involved with. And what I will do also following as a follow-up is I will email you this information so that if you signed up and attended, you will get this information, all these links via email directly in your inbox. So with that, if there are no more further questions, I would like to thank all of you for attending this, and I look forward to seeing you next week at a follow-up webcast or at a live discussion near you. Thank you very much.